We're continuing the life of Elisha today, and we're going to be in the account of the Shunammite woman. And it's a tremendous account of this prophet. We see a lot about him, the way he handles this. If you have a teacher's Bible or a reference Bible, if you're going to teach, you really need to have one that has cross-references and a concordance and hopefully a set of maps in the back. I'd like you to turn the set of I can say it, to the set of maps in the back of your Bible, to the map of Judah and Israel divided. And I want to show you what we're talking about, okay? Now, find the Dead Sea and go up the Jordan River to the Sea of Galilee. And if you'll go right over toward the coast of the Mediterranean, you'll see Shunem. It's the town. Now, if you'll keep on going toward the Mediterranean, up the Kishon River, you'll see Mount Carmel. So this is the town where the lady lives, and she's going to have to run to the prophet who's on Mount Carmel. So there's the distance, and it's in Israel. And that's what we're going to be dealing with. So we're going to be in 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 7 through 37. 8 through 37. All right? Let's look then. Now there came a day when Elisha, and again that means God is salvation, passed over to Shunem. Now this was a city in Galilee. We learned that from Joshua 19:18. And there was a prominent woman. Now the word in Hebrew means great. I don't know if she was big or tall or wealthy, but knowing the Hebrew, probably she was a wealthy, influential, known person in the community, okay? A prominent woman, and she persuaded him to eat food. Now, this would be the kind of person that always wants to take the preacher home for lunch and is just thrilled to death when someone from the church comes by and eats with them. This lady, I guess, had the gift of entertainment and hospitality, and she wanted this prophet to come and eat at her home and stay at her home whenever he could. Now notice it says, as often as he passed by. And down in verse 9 it says, I perceive this is a holy man of God passing by us continually. So this means that basically Elisha had a circuit that he normally went on. Now we learn from 2 Kings chapter 2 verses 1 through 4 that probably it was Gilgal, Bethel, Jericho were three of the stops on his route. But I guess Shunem, or at least Mount Carmel probably, was the place he went to when he passed through there. But he was going through there on a periodic way. And the lady said, he comes by here all the time. I'd really like to help this man. I feel like he's a man of God. Now, a holy man of God meant that it was someone who God spoke to and used. And this lady perceived that, and she really wanted to help. So she asked her husband, said, let's build a little place up on the roof so he can rest when he comes. Now notice it says, put a bed in there, a table, a chair, and a lampstand. Now the roof, most of the roofs are flat, and in the heat of the summer, they're the place that people want to sleep on the roofs. The roof was the place that people met for picnics. In Jerusalem, they almost call it a road of roofs, and that's where everybody met. It was like the backyard in our day was the roof. Well, she built him a little house up there, but what was unusual about it, and there's an access from the street, usually these little rooms only had enough room for a bed. But she built it large enough that he almost had a study room, had a table and a lamp. That was very unusual. So she really went the second mile in providing this prophet a place to sleep and rest and study. Okay? Verse 11. One day he came there and turned into the upper chamber and rested. And then he said to Gehazi his servant, call the Shunammite. And when he had called her, she stood before him. And he said to him, now say to her, notice the prophet speaking through Gehazi, behold, you have been careful. The word here in Hebrew means respectful, awful. Awful in the sense not of a bad, but respectful, awe, filled with awe. For us, with this care, what can I do for you? Would you be spoken to the king or to the captain of the army? Now what this prophet's saying is, I'm an influential person, and if there's anything you need me to help you with, if you got a problem with the king, I'll speak to the king. If you got a problem with the army or the police, I'll speak to the captain of the army. Tell me, I'm influential. What can I do for you? Now the prophet was just trying to say thank you, but boy, the lady's answer is, I don't need anything. I appreciate the offer. I'm just helping you because I love God. I don't want anything from you. There's no hidden agendas, no hidden motives, ulterior motives. I don't need anything. That's what she says. I live among my own people. So he said, well, then what can be done for her? And Gehazi answered, truly, she has no son and her husband is old. Now in the Old Testament, two unique things caused people to believe they had been cursed by God. One of them was leprosy. That was almost a divine illness. If you got leprosy, everybody thought that you had done something and God had inflicted you with this curse. And the other one was barrenness. Now, being barren, or without a child, without a son, really, the Hebrews believed in the Old Testament before the clear revelation of God that they lived on their children. So to have no children meant that your seed would stop on the earth. It was a tragic thing for Jewish people. Now there was this idea about her husband being old. We don't know how old this lady is, but apparently her husband was very old. And here is a sign that God is going to be able, through the prayers of this prophet, to physically manipulate or change or alter or miraculously incur physical conception. Now remember in Sarah when she heard this, and it says she giggled in her tent? I think she was giggling at her age, but she just thought, Abraham will never be able to do it. He's older than I am. And that's the implication here. It's not that she is unable to bear children. It's that her husband is so old. Well, look, there's several ones of these. I want to show you a graphic on barrenness that you can see several people in the Bible. There's Sarah in Genesis. And then we have Manoah's wife in Judges. We have Hannah in 1 Samuel, of course the mother of Samuel. And then we have Elizabeth in the New Testament, the cousin to Mary. And all of these are signs of a supernatural birth. Now, this is not a virgin birth. The birth of Jesus through Mary is without a father. But these are miraculous births where God's going to work in a physical way. Now, let's notice, if we could then, verse 15. And he said, call her. When she called her, she stood in the doorway. And he said to her, at this season next year you shall embrace a son. And she said, no, my Lord. O man of God, do not lie to your maidservant. Now that sounds a little harsh in English, but if I could paraphrase, she said, shoot, you're putting me on. There ain't no way that can happen. And that's kind of what she's saying. She's saying, oh, I can't believe it. Don't tell me that when it's not true, because really what she said, I've longed for a son, and I believe you're a man of God. Don't kid me in that area. Don't put me on in that area. That's a very sensitive area in my life. And the prophet says, it's going to happen. It's going to happen, girl. And the woman conceived and bore a son at the season next year, as Elijah had said to her. There's several years between verse 17 and 18. How many, I really don't know. It says, when the child was grown. Well, I think that means when he is beyond the age of being weaned. When he's old enough to go into the fields with his daddy to see what his daddy's doing. Now, it doesn't look like the child is participating in the work. He's just in the field with his daddy observing what's happening. I would say the child is somewhere between 5 and 9 or 10. Somewhere in that area is what we're talking about. That's what's going to happen. So several years have passed. And the day came when he went out to his father to the reapers. So it's harvest time. This area, if you'll notice on your map, around Mount Carmel and down the Kidron Valley, is world famous for its corn crops. And so maybe that's what the father did, was grow corn. We're just not sure, but that's a world famous corn growing area. And the boy said to his father, my head, my head. Now you can almost see the picture. This little boy is out there. Apparently he didn't take a hat. It seems that the boy had a sunstroke. And it's just very graphic about, oh, my head, and the daddy says, take him to his mother. They take the boy to his mother, and you can just see the picture here in your mind. The mother holds this little boy in her lap, and by noon the boy dies. Well, what a graphic picture. The little boy calling to his daddy and taking it to his mother, the mother rocking him, and the boy died at noon. Well, this mother, she went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God and shut the door behind him and went out. Now, whether she thought that bed was holy because the prophet slept there, or whether she had already planned what she was going to do, I don't know. She doesn't tell the daddy at all what's happened. Takes that little boy upstairs, lays him on the prophet's bed, and she called her husband and said, please send me one of the servants and one of the donkeys that I may run to the man of God and return. Well, this is harvest time. Can't you see that big old farmer saying, hey, this ain't Sunday. There ain't no revival at church. This ain't Wednesday prayer meeting. How come you want to take a servant and a donkey right in the middle of harvest time, woman? Don't you know it's harvest time? Well, this wife just says, shalom, which means peace. Cool it. I know what I'm doing. Just send me the servant and the donkey, honey, and I'll take care of it. Well, the husband does it, sends the donkey and the servant, and the lady comes. Notice in verse 23, and he said, why will you go to him today? It is neither new moon nor Sabbath. Now, I want to show a graphic to you on the new moon. Yeah, you see it there. This basically has several connotations. Now, usually when I used to think about this, I thought it was the full moon, but that's different. If you look at number 4, the Passover and the Feast of Tabernacles occurred at the full moon. But when the first little crescent of the new moon appeared, there was a religious festival. You see it there in the Old Testament. We even have an allusion in the New Testament in Colossians 2:16. So look on your outline. You'll see all those in Numbers and Hosea and all those. Now, basically it was a different festival from the regular Sabbath and a different festival from the regular assigned feast days in the Mosaic calendar. So what he's just saying is, hey, it's not a regular church time. What are you doing wanting to go in the middle of harvest? She didn't tell him at all what's happened. Why? We don't know. Then she saddled a donkey and said to her servant, drive and go forward, and do not slow down the pace for me unless I tell you. Well, here's the picture. This little lady is going to ride this little small burro or donkey, and the servant is going to run before this donkey and lead it. And what she's saying is, you go as fast as you can until I tell you it's too fast for me. Now, they got to run several miles from that city of Shunem to Mount Carmel where the prophet is. It's an uphill run. She says, you take off and you go as fast as you can possibly go. Can you see the picture of haste in this lady? Okay. It's about a 14 to 17 mile run. So she went and came to the man of God at Mount Carmel. And it came about when the man of God saw her at a distance, he said to Gehazi his servant, behold, yonder is the Shunammite. So he apparently knew her quite well and recognized her from a distance. And here she came running. I guess by the speed, he knew something was wrong. He tells his servant, please now go meet her and say to her, is it well with you? Is it well with your husband? Is it well with the child? And she answered, it is well. Now many have wondered, what in the world is she doing answering it as well? Well, here's a good place where books are really helpful in understanding the Bible. This is an Oriental culture. I was visiting this week with a missionary from Taiwan. He was telling me that nothing in Taiwan happens except through a third person. And witnessing is very difficult on Taiwan because everything is arranged through a third person. Don't you catch that here? The prophet never seems to speak to the lady directly. He always speaks to Gehazi, and then Gehazi speaks to the woman. And it's that it seems funny when I said 3 people involved. Now, I want to show you 2 books that I think will be helpful. This book is called The History of Israel by John Bright. It's a little old now, but it's one of the, mine's even fallen apart. I've used it so much I got it taped together. John Bright, History of Israel. It's put out by Westminster Press. This is an excellent book on learning the historical background of these historical books. There are not many good commentaries on 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles. It's just not anything. And that kind of book will be very helpful. Another book that's extremely helpful about it is well. Remember when she said it's well? Well, it wasn't well. She was sick to death. Her sons died. Why would she say it's well? Well, that's where these customs and manners of the Orient and of the ancient world are so important. In the ancient world, if you ask someone, how are you, the only response they can give you is, I'm fine. The second statement may mean it's terrible, but that first statement has got to be it's fine because of etiquette. So she's just following the etiquette of his day. And here's a little book that'll really help you in that. The Manners and Customs of the Bible by James Freeman. This is a paperback book. It is not expensive. It's indexed completely, and you will understand much, much more of the Bible if you'll buy that book. And it's indexed, and it'll help you. And these are exactly the kind of places that you'll find no place else this kind of help. It is well. It is not well. But that's just, you just see the Bible as part and parcel of its own day right there. She came to the man of God, to the hill. She caught hold of his feet. Well, that's what Mary did to Jesus. Again, here, this is a cultural thing. It was a sign of reverence. To kneel down and grab someone's feet was a sign of homage. Mary didn't want to let Jesus go, and this lady had a request for this servant of God. Now, Gehazi almost tried to pull her away. It's amazing how the disciples did the very same thing Jesus, try to protect him from people. And that's what Gehazi is trying to do with this woman. But the man says, no, let her alone, for her soul is troubled within her. It's bitter. The prophet was not only knew about things God told him, but it's obvious looking at this lady that there was some problem. This lady had been so kind to him and so sacrificial and not wanted anything. He says, no, leave her alone. Boy, there's a problem. And the Lord has hid it from me, and he has not told me. Now, I don't know how much God told this man on a day-to-day basis of what was going to happen. But he was used to knowing these things in advance. He said, I'm surprised. God has not revealed this to me. I don't know what's happening. The implication is that God normally did tell him about the affairs of life in other people's lives. So, then he said, Then she said, did I ask for a son from my Lord? Did I not say, do not deceive me? Look back at verse 16. The prophet said, something wrong with the boy, isn't there? The boy's dead, isn't he? Verse 29. Then he said to Gehazi, gird up your loins and take my staff in your hand and go your way. And if you meet any man, do not salute him. And if anyone salutes you, do not answer. And lay the staff on the lad's face. Now, several cultural things here. Next time you put on your house robe, if you're used to wearing a robe of any kind, you know you can't run with a flip in those things. So when the Bible says gird up your loins, it means to reach between your legs and pull the robe up and tuck it in the girdle or the sash in the front. It pulls that material real tight across your thighs where you're able to run or work. So that's what gird up your loins means. Now when it says here, take my staff, the staff was a symbol of the prophetic office. It was a shepherding staff probably. He could have given him the mantle. That was another symbol of his office. But he gave him the staff and he said, run. Do not salute anybody. Now what does that mean? Well, the Orientals really have a long procedure of greeting one another. So what he's saying, if you pass somebody on the road, don't stop to pass the time of day. Don't give them the cultural niceties. Don't participate in the normal etiquette. You just run. Don't say hello to them. Don't let them say hello to you. You get to that boy and you lay that staff on his face. Well, I guess this prophet thought that would do it. But I want to tell you, in verse 30, that lady says, as the Lord lives, I'm not leaving you till you come. Staff or no staff. Now, as the Lord lives, again, is an oath. The word lives is based on the meaning of the name Yahweh, which is the covenant name for God, Exodus 3:14. It comes from the Hebrew verb to be. So as the Lord lives is swearing by the life of God, which is the only life there really is. All right? So Gehazi passed on before them and laid the staff on the boy's face, but neither sound nor response. So he returned to meet him and told him the lad has not awakened. Now death is symbolized in the Old Testament as sleep. That's exactly what the metaphor Jesus uses in the New Testament. Now, many in our day say, well, that means an unconsciousness between the time we die and the time the Lord comes back. That you can read too much into these metaphors. Sleep is just the metaphor used to mean that death is not a radical separation. It's like a sleep for the people of God. Now, when Elijah came into the house, behold, the lad was dead and laid on the bed. He's not sick. He's not passed out. He's not in a coma. He's dead. All right? So he entered and shut the door behind them both and prayed to the Lord. Two things. It's kind of like Jesus not letting the crowds in for his miracles. He closes the door, and the implication is he's by himself in the upper room. And praise the Lord. Friends, Elisha knew the source of his power. There was nothing in him to say, hey, I'm going to raise this boy. He said, oh, God, help me. I was kind to this woman. I'm trying to be kind to her. You know this was going to happen. Lord, help me. And look what he does. He went up and laid on the child and put his mouth on his mouth and his eyes on his eyes, and his hands on his hands. He stretched himself on him, and the flesh of the child became warm. I read some commentators. I thought I was going to die of laughter. They said, well, what this is, he is trying an ancient CPR technique. Oh, yuck. This is no medical procedure to resuscitate this boy. This is no heart massage. This is what Elijah had done years earlier that apparently he had told Elisha about. Back in 1 Kings 17, 21 through 23. Elisha doesn't know what to do, so he remembers Elijah told him how he one time did this to a boy. So Elisha does the same thing. Now the flesh became warm because of Elisha's temperature, but the boy didn't wake up. Now, notice, and he returned and walked in the house once, back and forth, went up and stretched himself on him again. Now, this reminds me of several things. I think there's several things happening here. Number one, I think God is going to do a marvelous thing in the life of this family. But I think God's working with this prophet to test this prophet's faith. You see, this prophet prayed to God, and then he tried something that didn't work. And now he's walking back and forth. Can't you just hear him praying again? Oh, God, what can I do? Oh, God, please help this boy. Oh, God. And now he's going to go back and try it again. I think based on Matthew 7 and 8, when it says, keep on seeking, keep on knocking, that's what God's trying to get this prophet to trust him. You know, it reminds me, and I don't understand all of this about healing and how it works in the Bible. It's done so many different ways. But it reminds me of Mark chapter 8, verse 22 through 26. In this account, Jesus is going to heal a blind man. And first he makes some spittle and anoints this man's eyes with spittle. And he puts it on the man's eyes and he says, can you see? And the man says, I see people as trees walking, which means I can see a little better, but I still can't see. And then Jesus lays hands on him and prays, and he sees completely. Have you ever wondered why Jesus couldn't heal that man completely the first time? Jesus Christ, the incarnate Son of God, why couldn't he heal that man completely just with a spoken word? Well, he could. But he was working with that man's faith. There was a purpose in that man not being able to completely see the first time. Apparently, there is a purpose in God making this prophet perform this symbolic act of transferring life to this boy twice. Maybe God had to show this prophet it isn't his power without God's will and presence. And so, whatever the reason, he makes him do it twice. And he goes back and lays on the boy again. And suddenly, the lad sneezes 7 times and opens his eyes. Boy. And he called Gehazi and said, call the Shunammite. And so he called her, and when she came in to him, he said, take up your son. And she went in and fell at his feet and bowed herself to the ground. She took up her son and went out. I don't understand all the why that these things are recorded, and I'm sure there are many more things that are not recorded that deal with things like this. I think there are several things involved here. Number one, that the walk is still a walk of faith, even for men like Elijah. The same kind of thing reminds me about Moses in Exodus 3, where God says, you will fully know that I am with you when you bring the people back to this mountain. You mean Moses had to walk by faith? The whole Exodus experience was a faith experience for Moses? That's what it says. You will not really know that I'm with you till you bring the people back to this mountain. You mean Elisha had to walk by faith? Yeah. You see, I don't think we can just presume on God's power and presence. I think we can know how God acts in the past. I think we can implore Him and beseech Him on others' behalf. But friends, we have to walk by faith. Elisha had to know that it wasn't Elisha. It was God. And so the first time resuscitation failed. Have you ever tried to help somebody in God's name and it just fell through miserably? That's the way Elijah felt. He was doing something good, but something evil came out of it. And God had to bring it back. Now, I don't have all the answers about why the little boy died and why God allowed it. I don't understand all about the problems and evils of life, but I know this. God is with us. God loves us. And if we'll keep on keeping on in faith, it'll make a difference in our everyday life. Keep on seeking. Keep on knocking. The door shall be open to you. This mother showed faith. This prophet showed faith. And it was used in a little boy's life. I've enjoyed being with you. I hope you'll get these 2 books, Manners and Customs of the Bible by James Freeman and A History of Israel by John Bright. They'll be very helpful to you if you'll read them and if you'll index them in your teaching Bible. I'll see you again next week. God bless you.